for Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays. I started a segment last year on the 13 attributes of mercy, and I only did half of it. Actually, I brought the explanation from the palm tree of Devorah, which is a great Kabbalistic work by Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. And so next week, I'm going to be doing, let's say, like a 3 or 4 week segment based on that to review and try to integrate more the Yud Gimel Midos in order for us to be able to bring down actually that expression of God into this world, because this world, we need a lot of patience, okay? So, and I'll explain more in the coming weeks, but from next week on, for the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to be going over that, and I'll be handing out sheets in order to go over that, how we can behave in a more godlike way. It's all about behaving more godlike. This is also this week's parsha, and every single thing that the Hasidic masters are teaching us are also very much the same. So here, in this week's parsha, we start off with a great phrase in Parshas Shoftim, actually, because it's going to be this coming Shabbos, right? So Shoftim starts off with Shotrim, sorry, right? Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha b'kol sha'arecha, okay? So the idea of Shoftim, of course, it's simply understood of that you have to make sure that there are judges and officers in all of your gates. Interesting thing that I've always saw that why does it have to be in the gates, the judges, right? Why can't the judges be inside the city, in the municipality? The municipality is never at the gate of the city, right? So I actually was in a tour in Israel, and I did see one ancient city where they did have a position that the actual judges would be at the gates, and usually, just simply to understand, is that the farmers, the people outside the towns would come in and they want to do their business with the judges first, because they had all kinds of questions to ask and things like that. So before they'd actually go into the city or go into the marketplace, they could handle all of their affairs that way. But there's a much deeper meaning that is always discussed and is always brought down by all of the Hasidic masters. When it says by judges and officers you should put in all of your gates, which Hashem gives to you, right, according to your tribe, and they should judge the people in righteousness. So the idea is always understood in terms of, let's say, the here and now for us, because we don't have judges and officers in our gates. Simply, judges are the people who render the decision, and the officers, police, are going to be the ones who actually enact whatever the judges rule. The judges say, okay, everybody's got to make sure that they take their trumas and maasros. They have to take their tithes from the fruit. If you're going to sell it in the marketplace, you have to make sure you take your tithes first. So the officers would go around and make sure the people took their tithes, right? Simply, just to understand. But of course, in the deeper sense, we always have to get into the simple meaning, in the deeper sense, is that our gates, our personal gates, the gates of our soul, what are those gates? Because we're always talking that the Torah is the soul code. So many of the ethical Sforim, the Musar, and many of the Hasidic writers say that our gates are our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our senses, okay? They are called gates because they are gateways to the mind, our senses. How do we interpret what is going on around us? So judges and officers in our gate, which means our eyes and our ears and all of our senses, has to have blocks, has to have or come from a perspective of we're going to understand things according to the Torah. In other words, if experience comes to our senses, we need to judge on what is that is coming. We're judging all the time, aren't we? Right? The thing is, how do you do it but tzedek, right? How do you do it in righteousness? You have to do it righteous, because we can't, a lot of times, and most of us, this is really deep, we always fall prey to all of our past experiences and all of the things that we've learned as a child, or maybe things we got from other lifetimes that were called in Yiddish verkrumpt. Verkrumpt means it's crooked, it's messed up, okay? In other words, a lot of times people see things in the world and they'll view them in the same way that that they always did, instead of looking at it anew. The Torah always teaches us to look at things anew for the first time. And so judges and officers in our gates, which means, okay, when we see something, we're going to view it, we judge it. Is it acceptable to go into our minds, to go into the city? Okay. So judges and officers in the gates, this is one meaning, but not what the Baal Shem Tov brings down. Okay. Judges and officers in our gates. Our gates are our senses, and we have to make sure that we place judges and officers in our senses to make sure that whatever we ingest, smell, even smells, right? Hear. People speak Lashon Hara. It's amazing how people just accept it as true. And the law is, if somebody says some gossip about somebody, we don't accept it. Don't accept it. It is not acceptable. Okay? Actually, it brings down, on the mouth of two witnesses a matter is established. You need two witnesses to say if something is true or not. And then those witnesses have all of their criteria that they need to fall into. And so people will obviously, and especially the news and all that kind of stuff, it's all, it's unbelievable what they say, and they have all their narratives and how they criticize people and how can you do this and no, that's not how we behave, right? We don't accept things on face value. He said, she said. We want the truth. And so if we ever were in a situation where we hear some gossip about somebody, this is just one example, we don't accept it. We say it's not true. Or you can know if it could be that something dangerous, like somebody could harm you, so you keep it as a grain of salt and you verify and you take precautions. But other than that, we accept it as not true. But now comes the more deeper explanation the Baal Shem Tov says. When he says, judges and officers, you shall put for yourself in all your gates. Now, what is a gate? Okay, what is the gateway to the soul? Because that's how the Torah is always understood. So this is so deep, it's so amazing. Thank God for the Baal Shem Tov and the Holy Masters. He says you must put love and fear in all your gates. Okay? And how does he explain that? In all of your thoughts. So now, what are thoughts? Thoughts, as he's explaining here, because he brings from the verse in Proverbs, because it says, her husband is known in the gates. This we sing in Ashes Chayil every Sabbath evening, right? On Friday night, we sing Ashes Chayil, a woman of valor who can find. And it's not necessarily speaking about someone's wife, even though the wife is probably, my wife rolls her eyes, says, don't sing that song, rolls her eyes, okay? Because she just wants to get to the food. She's thirsty, she's hungry, okay? But obviously, the real understanding of the Ashes Chayil song, the Woman of Valor song that we sing on Friday nights at the Shabbos table, is her husband, which means is the Shekhinah's husband, which is the divine presence, is God. The Ein Sof is known in the gates. Now, gates here, he's telling us, bombshell idea. Your thoughts are your gates. Okay? Wow. We do know this from other places. Actually, the Baal Shem Tov has told us in a kind of a different kind of imagery that our thoughts are garments for our soul, which is a kind of a real dynamic thing. When you think of your thoughts that are garments for the soul. So it is a gateway in order to understand or perceive or connect with our soul, or our thoughts. Now, thoughts will run, as we know, goes a whole scale, right? A whole spectrum that your thoughts will your brain automatically thinks, but then again, you can always grab the reins whenever you want, and you can control your thoughts, right? Not necessarily control the thoughts that come in to your mind, but do you hold on to those? Let's say if you get a disturbing thought in your mind, are you going to hold on to it, or are you going to say no and you throw it out, right? Like a judge. A A judge is going to say, no, that is not an appropriate thought. Okay? So we have the insight here of our thoughts, our gates to the soul, which is really the connection to the Ein Sof, to the infinite. Now, the interesting thing he says, put love and fear. The love and fear are those judges and officers. It's interesting how, if you look at it, the metaphor is love and fear. Is love the judge and fear is the officer? Or, this is your question for homework, is fear the judge and love is the officer? What do you think? Okay, write me what you think. But the idea here is to come to know God. Her husband is known in the gates. To come to know God would be, in my opinion, here it seems, that your thoughts being gates to your soul, that to make sure you have the proper attitude all the time. Now, this is this is our kung fu, this is our tai chi, okay? That to make sure all that you love, and we're going to come to this and throughout the parsha, it seems like a lot of times the parshas have the theme to it, and this is kind of the theme of the parsha, is love and fear and wholeness. And so in order to be aware of your thoughts and to say, is there love in this? Or do I come to a love of God through this thought? And do I come to a fear? And by fear, I mean by an awe relationship, a respect, a reverence. Will this thought bring me to a love of God and to a reverence? And that's what it means by here. You have to put judges and officers in all of your gates, which means your thoughts have to always come from a desire, a will to integrate, to be attached to the Ein Sof through love and fear. Now, just to bring a little Tikkun Zohar, is that all the prayers that we say when we get together and we pray, or any prayer we say, that there are two wings that bring that prayer up to the heaven. Those two wings are love and fear. So here we have a different dynamic here, as looking at our prayers having love and fear are the wings that give it its elevation, okay, so to speak, okay? So we have, so far, we have our thoughts, love and fear. We have the wings of love and fear, okay? In all our gates. So that's going to be the theme here, as we're going to see, okay? And so the next piece is an interesting one, okay? The next piece says actually something interesting that happens to do with our thoughts. That's really dynamic. Okay, I'm skipping this next piece about the priests or Levites, okay? Actually, let's read it. Right, as you shall come to the priests and the Levites in those days. That'll be in those days, okay? So the idea here is, who are the priests, the Levites? Why does it have to say Cohen, Levim? We know that they're Levim, okay? So he says here, for all supernal outflow comes in two aspects, love and limitation. Here's an interesting insight, limitation. What is limitation, okay? So look here at the commentary, okay? According to the Kabbalah, the priests, the Kohanim, correspond to the Sfirot of the right column. As we know, in the array of the Sfirot, we have 10 Sfirot. But the way that is understood is there are 3 columns, the right, left, and the middle. The priests, Kohanim, are always associated with the Sphira of Chesed, of kindness. The Levites are always corresponding to the left column, which is the quality of din. We call it judgment, or actually how here he's saying is limitation, okay? This is always the flow, the cosmic flow, okay? Coming from the infinite into our world. God, who's completely infinite and there's no bounds, he only wants to give. But in order for us to receive it, he has to constrict it, he has to limit it, okay? Many times the Kabbalists look at the cosmic flow as being, let's say, water in a pipe. The water flows, but It has to be in a way that could be taken, so we need a pipe to limit the water flow, okay? So that's what kind of like kindness, chesed, and gevura, power, judgment, discipline, work together, okay? The aspects of love and limitation going toward in that note still in 201. According to the Kabbalah, the priest, the Kohanim, correspond to the spirit of the right, which convey the downward flow of chesed, whereas the Levites correspond to the spirit of the left, which represent the forces of limitation or tzimtzum. The first day of creation, God said, "Let there be light." And on the second day of creation, God limited the light. He stopped it. He said, "Whoa, whoa." Like we learned last week, the word die. On the second day, he went die. In other words, the light expanded until God said, "Okay, this is enough. Enough." Okay? Very much the same way. Okay, so love, on account of which God bestows to the lower world. That's one. And the aspect of limitation, which is that very outflow which descends from the upper world to serve the lower world. In other words, we need vessels. And the limitation, even though we kind of like steer away from it, it's limiting. No. We're babies here. We're children. We need vessels and something to hold on to the concept. So you have kindness, which doesn't have a boundary, but we even need it in a way that we can take it. Okay? But let's get to the next piece, okay? You shall set a king. This is really, really far out. You shall set a king upon yourself, whom the Lord your God shall choose from among your brothers. In other words, any king of Israel, by the way, it's really amazing. People don't really come. Democracy, we see democracy has many flaws to it. Maybe you guys know the quote from Winston Churchill that it's the worst form of government besides something else, right? So you think that democracy would be the best, but it's not necessarily so. According to the way that the Torah wants to govern the nation of Israel is through a righteous king, right? Someone who's divine appointed, okay? You have to understand Shmuel, the prophet. A little background here on Shmuel, right? I think Shmuel was the first prophet in about 800 years. In other words, once Yeshua brought in the Jewish people to the land of Israel, there was about 800 years where there was no 400, 800. I forgot the term. I'm not good with dates and numbers. But a long time, a big chunk, the whole period of the judges. There was no real God-appointed leader. After Yeshua, there was no prophets. There was occasionally a warrior who would come and fight the enemies. They call those judges, like Samson, everybody knows. Devorah was one of them. And they would fight away the bad guys, and then there would be peace for 40 years until the people sank back into their old habits of going after false gods. And then God would send an enemy, like what we have today, the same pattern we see in the world today. When the Jewish people don't act right, God creates and sends an enemy. And then if the Jewish people would act right, God can take care of those enemies easily. Okay? The enemies come for all those who are involved in Amunah as a stick. There's a master, there's a stick, and there's a servant. The master takes a stick and hits the servant. Now, the servant doesn't go to the stick and get angry about it. The servant should go to the master and going like, "Okay, you're right, I blew it, thanks a lot, I got it," right? Instead, what? We get into the stick and we go to psychologists about the stick and we talk about the stick all day and we're all involved in the stick. Meanwhile, it's just a stick, okay? Go to the one who's using the stick, okay? It's a big dynamic in Amunah. So for like, say, 400 years, there was no God-appointed leader. And then people were in Israel until Shmuel came, Samuel the prophet. And he was a prophet. He would go all over the countryside, and he had his own RV. Let's look at it as RV, okay? And he'd park it wherever he would park it, and he would help the people in the villages of the cities where he would go to. And, he would go around, he would do a tour, right? So he was in tune with the people. And what happened was eventually the people came to him and said, "We want a king." And you know what his reaction was? "You got a king. God is your king." Right? But no, We want a king like everybody else. Johnny's got a king. Reuben's got a king. This nation has a king. We want a king too. So he rolls his eyes and says, okay. So they got the first king of Israel. They found Shaul HaMelech, King Saul. King Saul was amazing. He was a really righteous guy. Head and shoulders above everybody, not just physically head and shoulders. Okay? As the Noam Elimelech points out, real deep, real good, amazing understanding here about King Saul. Righteous, but so righteous and so genius and so high, head and shoulders above everybody, he couldn't fathom the problems of the other people. He couldn't, geniuses, their temperaments are not always amiable because they don't get that people don't get it, because they get it and they don't understand that there's people that don't get it, right? So it's hard to relate to geniuses, right? Geniuses, it's hard for them to relate to people. They're good, okay, but they don't get that people don't get it. So King Saul also, he was head and shoulders above everybody in a metaphoric way, conceptual way, that he couldn't get that people can't get it. Anyways, he was flawless except for that one area. And then, of course, he was told by by Shmuel, okay, it's time. You got to take out Amalek. We got to get rid of these guys once and for all. Finish them, everything. No cattle, no sheep. Nothing remains. And, of course, King Saul gets an army, goes to war. And the story goes that he spares Agag, the king of Amalek, right? And the cows look so good for sacrifices, and the sheep. Oh my God, we can't. We can sacrifice them for a holy purpose. We're elevating the sparks, right? So Shmuel gets the word that Saul blew it, and he goes to Saul and he says, basically, you blew it because you left the king alive and you saved the cattle, right? So because of that, King Saul, in the cosmic sense, lost his kingship. Of course, he didn't give it up. We all know, if we haven't known now, that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it's very hard for people who are in positions of power to just easily relinquish that power. It is, like, I've seen it in my lifetime, right, in several places where a person in a position of power never wants to let go of it. But still, according to the direction of the divine, King Saul was no longer king. And so the story goes that God told Samuel the prophet, he says, you need to appoint another king. And okay, so, all right, I'll do whatever. I'm a servant. I'm ready to serve. He says, you have to go, and you have to go to the house of Yishai, Jesse. And Jesse has a son, and you have to appoint a king from the house of Jesse. So Shmuel's like freaked out. He says, there's no way. Then why? Samuel is afraid. Okay? And the reason he's afraid is what the Baal Shem Tov is going to tell us here, something really dynamic. So if you look in there in the text, it says the king of Israel is the heart of Israel. Take a deep breath. The king of Israel is the heart of Israel. What is the heart of a person, right? When we think of the heart of a person, most people will not say it's the physical heart, okay? It's the deepest part of ourselves that directs everything. So the king of Israel, let's say if you look at the people as being a body, the king is the heart of Israel. Once he explains that and says this rule, so then it says, this explains the verse, how can I go? Because Samuel the prophet was told by God, go and appoint a son of Jesse. So King Saul says, how can I go? Saul will hear and kill me. King Saul, is going to find out I'm going to go and anoint another king. But he's the king. What am I, chopped liver? Okay? So how can that be, right? So the question is, why is he afraid? First of all, he's only afraid in going. How can I go and appoint a king? Saul will hear and kill me. Wait a minute. How's Saul going to hear? If you think about it, right? How's Saul going to hear that Samuel is going to go and appoint another king, right? As it says here. Why was he scared? Okay. So why was he scared to go? He could have gone in secret. Okay, you just take a drive. I'm going to the 7-Eleven to pick up some ice cream. Whoa. Yeah, what's the big deal? Right? So you go. Where are you going, Samuel? People see Samuel walking down the street. Where are you going? I'm going to go get some ice cream. Right? I'm going to go, I'm going whatever. What's none of you? I'm going none of you. Okay? Which means none of your business. Right? Well, the real thing, right? What he could have said, and what should have been the real valid fear for Samuel, for Shmuel, was, how can I come back? Once I come back, everybody's going to know what I did. And then King Saul is going to kill me. In other words, not the fear shouldn't be, how can I go? It's this, what's going to be when I come back? That should have been the real question. But he didn't ask that. Okay? He was afraid of going, not returning. Not when I come back, it's going to get discovered because, it's the word's going to get out. Don't you know? Didn't you see what Samuel did? I was looking through the bushes. He was pouring oil on a son of on David, right? So it would get about, and the buzz would come out, and Saul would hear it, and then he would go kill Samuel, Shmuel. So it should have been when I come back, I'll get killed. Not when I'm going, I'll get killed. So what's the deal? So the answer is, right? The reason is because the king is the heart of Israel, and the heart hears. Okay? What does it mean the heart hears? Okay? Which means that it understands, which really is saying basically that the king knows what's in the heart of every single Jew. Okay? Get that? In other words, the real king, once he's anointed, that's the amazing thing about this anointing oil. We don't know I know what's in it, right? You can't make that oil, right? But once you're anointed, you have a connection to every single soul of the Jewish people, and you know their thoughts, okay? So since they know, the king knows the thoughts of every Jew, Samuel was afraid. How can I go? He's going to know my thoughts. And he's going to come and kill me because I'm on my way to go to anoint another king. And the king knows the thoughts of everybody. Now, it's one of those things that's kind of wild where it's really kept from a person what's in another person's thoughts. It's really kept from, it's one of the 6 things. Like a person, they don't tell you another person's thoughts from heaven. They don't tell you the day of your death. They don't tell you, a bunch of other things. They don't tell you what success you're going to have, what parnasa. They don't tell you that. 6 things are not given to a person to know. But we've seen, and we see here from Shmuel the prophet, that kings do know what goes on in thoughts. The Baal Shem Tov also had the power to know thoughts. Okay. So, like the Baal Shem Tov, once this guy came to the Baal Shem Tov to test him, he says, I heard you know people's thoughts, right? And the guy says, yeah, go ahead, test me. Baal Shem Tov, right? He says, okay, what am I thinking now? Boy, you better get yourself out of here. You're crazy. Okay, so he says, what am I thinking now? So Baal Shem Tov says, you're thinking of the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. And the guy says, everybody's thinking of Yud Kei Vav Kei. He says, not so. Some people thinking of Elohim, some people Shekai, some people, holy rabbis, are thinking of other names of God. You were thinking of Yud Kei Vav Kei. And the guy goes, you're right. So he admitted. There was this other great story. Oh, I'm going to embellish here. Are you ready? I haven't told this story in a long time, but it is so big. I hope I could tell it right. Hashem help me. There was this businessman, a very wealthy man, supported the entire community. And once he got a visit from a baron, non-Jewish. And the baron wanted a considerable sum of money to borrow. But Baron did not give who he was, where he was from, anything. No ID. Just a strange non-Jewish man sitting in the study of this rich man going, I need like 5,000 rubles or whatever, 10,000 rubles. And the guy and the businessman, the Jewish businessman says, okay, and you are, and you live in, and the guy says, none of you, you just have a mitzvah to give, you just have that, you got to trust me on this one. I need the money. So the guy gave him the money. Crazy. And the guy didn't even think about it afterwards, right? Like years passed. And then the guy, what happens in the community where this guy was the city, the decree, the king got influenced by the advisors. He says, you got to kick out all the Jews. You got to make them convert or kick them out. That's it. Done. And so they got the king to pass this decree, right? And it was done through all of the bishops. It was done through the church, actually. It was done through the church. The ministers got together to eradicate the Jews. Kill them, right? And drive them out or death. So they come to this man and they go, you got to help us. You got to go to the Baal Shem Tov. He's your Rabbi. Go to him and ask him for advice. So the man goes to the Baal Shem Tov. And this man looks very Jewish, okay? Very distinct. He goes to the Baal Shem Tov. He says, look, what are we going to do? How can we annul this decree? And so he says, well, this is what you have to do. The only one who can annul this decree is the Pope himself. You have to go all the way to Rome. Go and speak to the Pope and get him to annul the decree. That's the only way you can do it. And the guy goes, do you understand? And that day, from what I was told in the story, was no Jews were allowed in Rome. I mean, I think the Pope had a little community somewhere, just a token Jews hanging someplace. But other than that, no Jews were allowed in the entire vicinity and even the surrounding areas. And any Jews that would go there would face certain consequences that were very harsh. If not imprisoned, beating up, imprisonment, both, death, I don't know. It was very serious. As a matter of fact, if you were caught in those parts as Jew, you're going to be in trouble. But yet, this man has the direction of the Holy Master, the Baal Shem Tov, the Holy Mystic, and he's going to make that ride. He gets in his carriage and sets off for Rome, to the Vatican, where the Pope is. Hopefully he can get an audience. He doesn't know the Pope. Who knows the Pope? How do you get into the Pope? Come on. Crazy, right? You're going to love this story. So anyway, so he's riding, of course, and he gets into the places where the neighborhoods are not friendly for Jews. And they recognize him, and there's a crowd surrounds this his carriage, and they're going to take him out and beat him. Because he looks Jewish. Hello, he's a Jew. He's in our neighborhood. Felonious, right? Let's go, right? So let's get him. So instantly the crowd surrounds this wagon, and they're about to pull this guy out. And then there's some nobleman comes and he sees and he says, hey, don't this his honor. For me to take care of him and punish him is my honor. It's me. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. You bring him to the palace, and I will do what is due to him. And so they bring the Jew, this rich man, into the house of the baron, and the guy looks at the Jewish man and he says, "Don't you recognize me? I am the one who you loaned that money to a long time ago, and here's your money right now. Now, what are you doing here? It's dangerous for you to be here." He says, "I'm here because there's an evil decree in the city where I'm in. We're going to be driven out or killed. And my Rebbe told me that I need to get an audience with the Pope." He says, God goes, who gets an audience with the Pope? He says, "I can get you in, but I have to train you on the etiquette of the Pope and what the Pope likes and how to speak to him properly." Fine. So he trains them in etiquette, how to get there, and what the Pope is very, of course, ego is a huge thing. You got to praise the Pope. Your Majesty is so divinely inspired, right? And all that kind of stuff, right? So you got to get into all that embellishment, right? So, of course, he's able to go ahead of this baron because he has interconnections, brings the Jew right to the Pope. And the guy's finally sitting there. The Pope says, Your Majesty, you're so divinely inspired. You have to help me. There's a decree there that only you are the one who can annul it. Only you are the only one who can annul this decree. And the Pope says, my hands are tied. All the cardinals already voted. It's a solid vote. There is no way to annul this decree. There's no way. I can't do it. But he says, you're so divinely inspired. You're above and beyond anybody. There's nobody who can come close to you in terms of your spirituality and insight and knowledge and connection. Blah, blah, blah. Right? And so the Pope says, there's no way I can go in to the whole court of all of the bishops and cardinals or whoever they are and tell them we got to turn this around. They're going to laugh at me and going, no, we've already voted. It's a done deal. It's sealed. The decree is sealed. He says, maybe there's a way. Do you ever do what we call like a divination with opening up a book and present that as a way? Is there a way that you could do that possibly? He says, yeah, we've done it in times before, the Pope says. He says, we take out a book of all of our logs or memory of past situations, of precedents, of stories that happened, and we'll open it up and use that as a method of getting an answer for certain cases. We have done that in the past. He says, this is what I'm asking you to do. Go in front of the cardinals, bring out the book of records. You'll open it up and you'll say, we're going to decide this case based on the story that I opened up in the book of records. What a chance. I mean, we're in deep water here, right? This is really nervous here. It's really scary, right? But the Pope is willing to do that. He says, I don't know if it'll help, but let's go try. I'll try. Obviously, this Jew won favor in the eyes of the Pope. And so the Pope goes in. Of course, the man is not there, whatever. Or maybe they are listening. I don't know, from the bleachers. I don't know. It's a long story, sorry. But in any case, here, the Pope is in front of all of the bishops, cardinals. He says, we're going to decide this case because I have a doubt about this case if it's really, truly just. It could be that this case started from a blood libel, okay, or something like that. And we have to see if this is really an innocent case, if this was really a blood libel for the issue, for the reason of the decree, or was fake, right? Libel, fake, or was it fake? We have to really give an issue, and because I'm having doubts about it, and I want to use the book. And everybody, of course, the book, he's going to use the book. Okay, so they bring out the book, okay, the book of all of the records, and he's going to open it up on a random page, read the story, and it'll give us an answer to this decree of the city. And based on whatever the book says, we're going to decide it. And does everybody agree? Everybody agrees. So they bring in the book of records, he opens it up, and he starts to read a story. And here's the story. It's a story within a story. It says there were these two tailors who were pretty successful, and they lived outside the city of Rome. And they were very successful making suits for a lot of people, very successful. Eventually, they even got permission even to live in the city, special permission, because they were so expert in what they do. They were two Jewish tailors, okay? And they were very successful at making suits for people and everything like that. And once they befriended one guy, one of the noble people. They were doing for all kinds of noble people. They had one noble people. They had befriended them, and they actually had a relationship with this one noble person. And eventually, this noble person says, "I want to take you to something special." He takes them, invites them to their house, and he shows them a hidden a bookcase. And in the bookcase was a cave, and there was unbelievable treasures inside this bookcase. And even his wife didn't know about it. Nobody knew about it except him. What happens, of course, the guy, showed him this treasure, and then the guy dies. And then the house is for a sale. They do an auction, and these guys know that they better bid and win that auction. If they win the auction, they get the treasure inside. So they go to the auction, and they outbid everybody, and they get the house that the nobleman was in. And of course, when they get the house, they get the treasures inside the house. Unreal, right? So what happened was, they're able to go ahead and peddle out the gems and the jewelries that were in that treasure, right? And of course, they awaken the jealousy of some people that decide to do a blood libel on them, okay, to accuse them of murdering somebody. So they put up some false charges against. They take a dead body and then bury it under the house, and And of course, they discover the body the next day, and it's under the Jews' house. The Jews are arrested, and they're going to be executed. And they're praying inside their jail cell. And this is the Pope reading the story to all these cardinals and bishops, okay? Bear with me, guys, okay? So they're going through, and they're reading all of the, the guys are there, they're praying, they're davening, they're in jail, they're going to be executed in 3 days. And finally, one guy that night, he has a dream. And the guy, and in the dream, there's an old man says, "You're going to be saved. You don't worry about a thing. You're okay, totally." And the proof of that is go and check the cell. Go and check the cell. It's open. And I want you to go out and take a trip to this tree out here outside the jail where you're going to see me, and I'm going to tell you. So the guy gets up. He opens up, and the door is open. And he goes out. He actually goes out. He's actually free from jail. He goes out and he sees the man there. The guy says, "Don't worry. You're going to be okay. You got to tell your buddy not to worry. Everything's going to be absolutely fine." And so he goes back to the jail, closes the door, and he sits. And the next day, he's okay. His buddy's freaking out because they're going to die, right? And they have family and kids and everything. And what happens is the day comes for the execution. The guy's feeling happy, and he actually convinces his friend also to have emunah and faith that they're going to be miraculously saved. Okay? And all of a sudden, they're about to be hung, right? And what happens is, at the last minute, somebody says, "I have evidence, Your Honor, that these two people are innocent." Don't forget, this is the Pope reading this to the cardinals and bishops. "I have evidence, Your Honor, that it was not these people who killed that kid." And he actually brings photographs. Don't ask me where they got photographs from. Maybe it was an picture artist rendering, I don't know. But maybe, this is how the story is. He actually brings proof or evidence that it wasn't this guy, it was that guy over there. And they go ahead and point the finger to this guy. So the real guy, the real perpetrator gets busted, right? And it's that guy. And these are witnesses and busted. And the whole thing is open. And of course, what they have, they claim that these two Jewish tailors are innocent and let them go. And that's the end of the story. The story doesn't end now. So here's the Pope reading this in front of all of the cardinals and bishops. And of course, based on the story, it was a false accusation. So therefore, the decree for the city is annulled. Wow. Amazing, fantastic. But the big thing that I got through this whole story to tell you was finally the Jew, after he does this miraculous event here to turn around the whole decree of his city, that now his people can live and thrive in the city where he lives. He goes back to the Baal Shem Tov to tell him the good news. Now this is the punchline. As soon as he walks into the Baal Shem Tov's study, the Baal Shem Tov lifts up his head and he goes, "Wow, what a story." In other words, the Baal Shem Tov he read the guy's mind, the entire story in the guy's mind. So the Baal Shem Tov knew how to read thoughts, okay? And the king here also knows how to read thoughts. And that's why Samuel was afraid when he was going, because Shaul would hear his thoughts and then come and kill Samuel the prophet. But coming back, he wasn't worried anymore. Because why? Was because King David was already appointed the new king. So King Saul lost his prophecy. He lost his Ruach HaKodesh. The idea here is for us to take home for this specifically is that inside of us there is a king. In other words, really in the soul connection of everything, there's a potential Messiah right now who lives in the world, in this earthly plane, right? He's a potential Messiah. There's a potential Messiah in every single generation. That potential Messiah knows our thoughts. Maybe he's not appointed yet. Okay, maybe not. But the idea here is that there's an element that knows all of the thoughts in our minds, the element of the kingdom of Mashiach. Now there is, the Baal Shem Tov always teaches us that within our soul, being that even though that there's a person who we have a soul connection to and knows our thoughts, in our soul is what we call Komat Mashiach, which is a stature of Mashiach, that every person has to spend his entire life fixing. Okay? What's called Komat Mashiach, which means stature. Now, I'm not so clear on the real nuance of stature versus the sliver of the soul or connection. It's more like there's a stature, there's a standing up, a building up of this function, soul function within us of the Messiah, that each and every person has to spend his whole lifetime trying to fix, to connect with. This is part of that connection, is to understand that there is a connection. That's the first thing, okay, within all of us, okay? Now, let's go to the next piece, okay, which is a great mitzvah that it brings down, probably encompassing the entire Torah. Sorry we have so few minutes to go over this one, even though it's so great and so big. And once again, it always has to do with thoughts, okay? And the verse says, Tamim tiye im Hashem Elokecha. Tamim, which means you shall be wholehearted with the Lord your God. This is Tamim, Tamimut, the language of Tam, which means whole. Now, according to the commentary of Rashi, simply it means that we don't go after necromancers or soothsayers or astrologers. We don't need to go ahead and try to say what's going to be. We don't need to ask that question, and we definitely don't need to seek it from any other source but God, as people do, right? We go wholeheartedly, and we don't ask questions to how God is running the world. The biggest example of this is Abraham. Abraham, he was told, I'm going to give you this land, right? And yet when it came time to bury his wife Sarah in the cave of the Machpelah, he had to buy it for like 400 grand, okay? Which was like an expensive, exorbitant amount of money for a hole, for a cave in the ground, okay? And after he bought it and he paid for it with cash, hard dollars, he didn't go to God and say, hey, you said you were going to give me the land, right? No. This is the plan. That's how it works. He didn't ask and come to God with claims, okay, or questions like that. All was perfect. All was coming from a place of wholeness, not asking questions, total acceptance of the way that it is going. So here he brings down something that we've been discussing for a long time. External fears. Oh, this is so apropos for this time, isn't it? External fears, right? That is fear of things in this world, whether real or imagined, even real. Coronavirus, Delta, or what we called it, Lambda. What was it called? Lambido? Lambda, okay? That strike a person are meant to awaken him to fear God. There's a thing called internal fear or real awe. And then there's what's called an external awe or external fear. And all of those fears that are outside fears, okay, they're only brought there. Of course, God is in total control of every single thing in the world. Every single thing. What, he's not in control of the coronavirus? He's totally in control. And he brings the fear if a person is experiencing fear, and that would be an external fear. It's coming from God for a reason, and the reason is to awaken a person to have the real awe of God. In other words, great, you can express it, you can understand it, you can experience this fear, and it's okay. Okay, any fear. My wife has a fear of turning left on West Belford. Okay, she says Shema Yisrael every time she turns left on West Belford. Okay, and it's okay. It's definitely justified. You got to watch out when you turn left. And so, but it's meant for a reason, and the reason is to awaken us to the real awe that we need of God. So, what is this like? Like a soldier full of wrath, who is sent by the king to summon a man, and strikes fear and dread in him. Imagine bounding on your door, and it's the army, the police, but it's not just the police; it's the FBI, and they come in to tell you, right, you're in trouble, okay? And they strike fear and dread in him. Yet, there is no reason to fear this messenger, only to go immediately to the king, to placate the king, talk to God, take it right to God. Okay? Actually, first you could really go, thank you, God, for this external fear. Now, give me, please, the ability to elevate it, to have a proper relationship of awe and respect and reverence with you. Thank you, God, for this. An amazing thing, also, I just have to bring this down because it's been in the back of my head for a long time, actually, was with the story with Joseph. Joseph actually fell in his emunah when the brothers took his coat off and threw him in a pit. And then whoever took him out of the pit, questionable, the Midianites, right, Mishmaites, right, took him out of the pit and sold him, right? And the brothers actually claimed years later, when they were actually in front of Joseph, when Joseph was still in disguise, they were saying, yeah, he pleaded with us, and yet we sold him. Right? They were going over their accounts. They did a soul account, which any Jew should do. This is like, why is this happening to us, that we're in this situation here where we're being accused of as spies? That's what Joseph did. And of course, they did an account. They're going, it was the boy. He pleaded with us, and we sold him while he pleaded with us. Joseph actually fell in his emunah because he should not have pleaded to the brothers. He should have been pleading to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He should have been going, God, save me from them. God, help me. Instead, he was pleading with the brothers. That was a little bit of a chisaron in emunah. It's a big place. A little bit of a lack. Okay, it was a flaw in his emunah. Now, he developed his emunah all the time, right? Until where he got in front of Paro after 22 years and says, I'm not the interpreter of dreams. God answers peace to Paro, and he's just like, it's not me, right? So he got to that place in his level of consciousness. So in other words, all external fears are meant to get us to a place of having a proper awe relationship with God. Now, it goes the other way too also, and it's very important. Okay? This is almost like what I told you about the stick. There's the master, the stick, and then there's the servant. The master takes the stick, hits the servant. The servant doesn't go and talk to the stick. You go to the master and you talk to God. Take it always right to God. Okay? Similarly, on the other side of the coin, very important, external loves are meant to awaken a person to love of God. Any love that you experience is a good thing, right? It's amazing to have love. What is this like? It's like a messenger of the king who shows gestures of love, right? Let's say, right? You have an experience of love. With my kid all the time, you're not allowed, according to the law, to kiss your child in a synagogue, because the synagogue is a place where you relate to God. And if you have your child come, or a grandchild come running in the synagogue, and they're so cute, and everybody's going, it's so cute, right? And you want to kiss the kid, you shouldn't kiss the kid, because why? That's an opportunity at that moment to elevate the love. Right. Not talking about lobbies. We're talking about in the synagogue itself, right? Not outside the synagogue. Right? Only in the synagogue where people are praying. The idea here is it's an opportunity for us to elevate the love that we have for the kid, grandkid, whoever it is, family member, close family member, to say, wow, I have this love for this person. And the love, really, I have to elevate to the divine, to say, wow, how much, God, I love you. God, I'm in so much awe of you. Okay? So it's like a messenger of the king who shows gestures of love. A foolish person will delight in and spend time with the messenger. But a wise person will say, why should I spend time with the messenger? Let me go to the root of the king's love. Right to the king. Okay. Thus it is written, you shall be wholehearted with the Lord your God. Now, the idea here is the letter Tuf. If you look in the Torah scroll, it's a big Tuf. Okay, the last letter, Tam. The word Tam is a great word. We'll talk more about this later. Tam is a fantastic word. Tam, which means whole. So the letter Tuf in the Torah scroll is written with a Tuf actually, and also a dot, a vowel dot. Okay. So the letter Tuf is an oversized letter. It's big in the Torah scroll. For the Tav is distant from the Aleph, This is a whole nother Torah that we'll have to go into. And this implies that one must uplift all the distant things, be they love, fear, joy, or physical pleasure, to what we call the Aleph. That is the master of the world. Now, the way we understand the Aleph Beit, it's really amazing how we always talk about the letters as being the primordial energy fields of creation, because God used the letters to make the Torah, and He used the Torah to make the world. So the letters are the building blocks and the energy forms. And if we look at the Aleph Beit, the Aleph is the silent letter, and that really represents the most unclothed. Let's say it has a clothe. It is a letter, right? But it's a silent letter. It's just ah. It doesn't have a b, g, d in it, right? And each letter subsequent to that, from Aleph to Beit to Gimel, the light of God, the infinite, is dressing deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the letters, going down, down. So the farther you are away from the letter Aleph, the more deeper into the physicality you are, the more deeper into the husks. So the Tuf, which is the last letter, really, that represents the farthest point away from God. And the idea here is to take that Tuf and you want to elevate it and bring it all the way back to God. Okay? So no matter what the experience we're in, we have to use emunah, our faith in God, our connection, to know that everything comes from God and it's meant to be elevating it. Okay? So now to recap, okay? Love and fear in all your gates means your thoughts always have to be directed with love and fear. Thoughts are very powerful, okay? They create things, okay? And they are the garments of our soul. And our soul, of course, is connected to all the souls of Israel, the Melech, the king, being the heart, our hearts, and the heart of the Jewish people, who knows and is aware of our thoughts. Judges and officers, love and fear. Everything we have to operate is through love and reverence, okay? Sometimes I get caught up in things of the world and I stop myself and I go, I'm too busy loving God. Okay, imagine yourself just saying that. That's your power thought for the week. I'm too busy loving God. Okay? Okay, and the idea, of course, of these love and fear is expressed with tamimus, with wholeness. Okay? Simplicity. We will talk more about this in Hashem, even though next week we're starting like a new segment. I will still recap on this a little bit because it's very, very deep. Okay? All right, we'll stop now. Okay, let me turn off the recording here. And